first for breaking news and the best live sport.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
It's 1 o'clock on AM and FM around the UK as we're joined by the BBC's nations and regions. This is BBC Radio 5 Live on digital and around the world online. I'm Dotun Adebayo. Tonight, President Obama puts a telephone call into his Iranian counterpart Hassan Rouhani. It's the highest level contact between the two countries for more than 30 years.
This new Iranian team realizes they're in a terrible economic predicament and that they have to get the sanctions removed, and they know the only way they can do that is to reach an accommodation on the nuclear issue.
We'll hear from a man who was around when the phone rang and who observed at close quarters the Iranian president's reaction to the surprise call. Also, there's agreement on a plan of action for dismantling Syria's chemical arsenal, but what's the military endgame? And there's a new menu at Sunderland FC.
I'm not saying to the lads, off you go and get a bucket load of ketchup, but condiments are there and available.
For our World Football phone-in, it's football in Africa and South America, so your thoughts and comments, please, on football in either region and players from over there playing in our leagues. We kick off in an hour. First, the BBC News on 5 Live with Nathan Turvey.
Thank you, Dotton. Good morning. David Cameron has confirmed plans to allow some married couples to transfer £1,000 of their tax allowance to their spouse. The measure, which would be introduced in 2015, applies to couples where neither is a higher rate taxpayer. Gavin Barwell is the Tory MP for Croydon Central.
As Conservatives, we believe very strongly that marriage is a very important institution in our society, and there ought to be some kind of recognition of it in the tax system. It's not about judging all parents are from a particular group, but the evidence would show you that children that are brought up in a married environment, on average, tend to do better.
President Obama has spoken to his Iranian counterpart, Hassan Rouhani, by phone. It's the first time the leaders of the two countries have talked to each other for more than 30 years. Mr. Obama repeated Mr. Rouhani's belief that the two sides could agree a solution to Iran's controversial nuclear program. Our correspondent at the UN in New York is Kim Gattas.
I was very struck in Mr. Obama's statement by his use of the expression, President Rouhani and I have directed our teams. Who would have thought that an American president would utter those words about a country that has been America's foe for so many years?
4 people have been charged with murder tonight after a mother and her 3 teenage children died in a house fire in Leicester. The 4, aged between 16 and 24, are due in court tomorrow. An 18-year-old has already been charged. A BBC investigation has revealed how the attackers in the shopping mall siege in Kenya were helped by security breaches, incompetence and confusion. The BBC has learned that the militants used fake IDs to rent a shop in the complex in Nairobi where they stored weapons. A UN panel on climate change says scientists are more convinced than ever that humans are the dominant cause of global warming. The experts say the evidence has grown since their last report in 2007, and they're now 95% certain. Dr. Paul Williams is a Royal Society Research Fellow at the University of Reading.
There are literally hundreds, thousands of independent strands of evidence, and that's what scientists look for. It's bad science, really, to take one piece of evidence and draw conclusions from it, but when all these different independent strands of evidence are all pointing in the same direction and telling a consistent story, that's when you start to take it seriously.
A special fund to pay for expensive cancer drugs in England is to continue for an extra 2 years. The Cancer Drugs Fund was due to finish next year, but will now continue until after the next election. And Tesco has withdrawn an inflatable doll that was being sold as a gay best friend. The doll, marketed by a third party on Tesco's website, was said to give fashion advice and bitch about anyone not wearing Jimmy Choos. The human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell says it's wrong to pigeonhole any group of people.
If this doll was a stereotypical presentation of a black person, I think a lot of people would rightly feel very offended. The same if it stereotyped Muslim people or Jewish people. And I think, part of me thinks it's harmless fun, but also part of me thinks it's a pity that it really gets into such a cliched way of presenting gay men.
And that's the latest 5 Live news. Now with the sport, here's Don Busby.
We're going to